it's Lon.TV, and a few weeks ago we took a look at the Moto X, which is a smartphone from Motorola that I was very impressed with. And now, of course, it's 3 weeks later, there is a new smartphone from Motorola on Verizon's network called the Droid Turbo. And in many ways, this feels a lot like the Moto X that we reviewed. It's got the same size screen, very similar form factor and overall industrial design. Really nice phone overall, very sturdy and rugged feeling. But they've added some significant enhancements to this phone, and I want to first thank the folks from the Wireless Zone for lending us this phone to review. They're a chain of Verizon authorized resellers both here in Connecticut and across the country, so check them out. They're going to be lending us phones on a regular basis from here on out, so if you've got requests, leave them in the comments below. The screen on this is significantly enhanced over the Moto X. This has got a quad HD display at 2560 by 1440, and that means that you're going to get even more pixels per inch packed into this 5.2-inch screen than you had before. So the Moto X had a 424 pixel per inch density. This one has 565 pixels per inch. It almost looks like you're touching a photograph now. It's that good. It's so good that you don't even notice it initially because the other phone was so good with its pixel density that when you look at this one at first, you're like, oh, it looks nice, but is it any nicer? Then when you start getting into photos and finer details, you really notice the difference here. You're really not going to be able to appreciate this because I only have a 1080p display here, or camera, and you're only looking at it on a 1080p display. So it's something you really have to go in and experience in person, but it is really, really nice. The viewing angles on the screen are also pretty good as well. So of course it's got an IPS display and all of the things that you would expect from a modern smartphone there. So really nice display. Now, in order to get the display to work, you're going to need a bigger processor because there's a lot more pixels to push to this one than you would on the other one. So they put in a Snapdragon 805, and that compares to the 801 on the Moto X. So what does that mean as far as performance is concerned? Well, on the 3D Mark benchmark, we got a score of 21,122. And that compares to 19,628 on the Moto X. So you're seeing probably about a 7 to 10% increase in overall performance. Not a lot, but really the difference is that this one has such a higher resolution display that a lot of that extra processing power is just going into providing you the same kind of experience you had on the other phone, but with a much higher resolution display. So a little bit faster. It also has more RAM. You've got 3 gigabytes of RAM in here compared to 2 on the other one. So that'll give you, as applications improve over time, you're going to see more developers taking advantage of phones with that extra memory space. I think the new Nexus 6 has that RAM size as well. So it's something we're seeing on a lot more of these devices out there. So that better processor and better display requires a bigger battery. So this has a 3,900 milliamp hour battery on board. Compare that, I think, to the 2,600 milliamp hours on the Moto X. So much more battery, but it doesn't necessarily get you much more battery life because driving this display and powering that processor require a lot more power in order to do that. So standby time I found to be remarkable. I had this thing on standby for like 2.5, 3 days and it still had like 20% left in the tank after all that time. You're not going to see that when you're actually using the phone. So I expect if you use the phone like any user of this phone would, you'll probably get all-day usage like you would see out of the Moto X or any other smartphone, but probably not days of use, given the fact that you're driving such a big display with a pretty big processor. Now, if you've got the big battery, you also need a way to charge it faster. They give you the Motorola Turbo charger, which is also available as an option on the Moto X. This one comes with it, and this gives you, faster charging times. They say you can get 8 hours of battery life back in about 15 minutes, and I think I'd believe that. If it was totally drained, you can plug it in and get some decent usage out of the phone with a very short charge. It gives you a lot more voltage out of here, especially when the battery is in almost a dead state. So it can really charge faster initially, and then it slows down as the battery fills up. Very similar to how those Tesla superchargers work, but it does work. The phone really heats up when the turbocharger here is going at full blast, so you'll definitely feel it getting very, very warm. Nothing to be concerned about, but it will definitely charge your phone quickly. But you'll see the overall charge time may not feel all that much faster because the battery is so much bigger than you might see in other phones. Now, the Droid Turbo does have a better camera, a 21 megapixel sensor, so significantly improved over the 13 megapixel sensor on the Moto X. So it gives you a real boost there. But what was interesting is that by default, it puts itself into this widescreen mode at 15.5 megapixels. So by default, it does still have higher resolution at 15.5, but to get that 21 megapixel resolution, you're going to need to open the camera app up here and switch it into that mode, and that's going to give you those square pictures. So you're not going to get the full widescreen photo when you're in that 21 megapixel mode. But here's some sample images of that 21 megapixel sensor. Really nice sharp resolution when you're outdoors, so pretty impressive there. Inside, as you can see here, it's not as good. You're going to get some graininess in low light conditions. So certainly it kind of has the same issues that a lot of smartphones deal with those tiny little sensors, is that low light is never going to be a strong suit of the camera. So that is the overview of some of the big differences. Now we're going to take a look at running some software on here. We're going to look at a couple of emulators and maybe a game. Let's take a look. All right, the first thing we're going to take a look at is the Dreamcast emulator Reicast running on the device here. And as you can see, it looks beautiful. I've often seen a lot of graphical glitches with this emulator on other devices, and there's certainly some. You can see a little bit kind of in the background there, but it is a lot better looking than other Android devices I've used. I think whatever GPU the Snapdragon Qualcomm stuff is using is more compatible with the Reicast emulator than I've seen on some of the Tegra-based devices that I've looked at. Frame rates are good. We're looking at about 50, 60 frames per second, which is excellent. Now, I did try to run the Dolphin Gamecube emulator on here. It's running just really slowly at the moment, so it's not quite yet playable. It's got a ways to go yet, but I've actually never gotten this far on most of the other Android devices I've tried running this on. So it is displaying something, and you're hearing broken sound, which is an improvement, so we're getting there. So it does actually tell me that there's probably a little bit more going on under the hood on this phone than I've seen on others, but we still have a ways to go on getting GameCube emulation working properly on Android. But if you've got some stuff that works, I'd love to hear from you, because I have yet to find any device that can actually run the Dolphin emulator as well as this one is at the moment, and this isn't very good just yet. Here's a little game I love to play on the Android platform. This is Asphalt 8, and it's a fast-paced driving game, so you can kind of see how the performance is on this. Really nice and smooth here. Really, and again, that screen is just gorgeous. So you got these really nice visuals on here as well. It runs pretty nicely too. So does really great with all the Android games you'll see out there. This is got a processor that is pretty much at the top of the heap right now. So I think it's going to do quite well if you're a gamer with all those retro games and with the modern Android stuff as well. So that is the Droid Turbo. And again, this is Verizon only at the moment. But I think if you're on Verizon and you're looking at this versus the Moto X, I would probably lean in this direction. It does cost a little bit more at its entry point. It is $199 with a 2-year contract, but you are starting off with 32 gigabytes of storage compared to 16 gigs on the Moto X at the entry point. So the Moto X is $99 with contract. There's also a 64 gigabyte version of the Droid Turbo that starts at $249. But you're getting a better processor, a better display, much better camera, better battery to some degree depending on how you're using it. And overall, I think it's just a better phone. Again, you're going to pay a little bit more, but I think it's going to last you a little bit longer because it is more powerful, and I think will kind of keep up with a lot of the apps coming out. So if you're not replacing a phone every year and you have the choice and you have an extra $100 to spend, I think the Droid Turbo is the way to go. This is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.